My name is Elliot Vance, and I should have known something was wrong when my wife started giggling at her phone like a teenage girl with her first crush. It was past midnight on a Tuesday, and Monique was supposed to be reviewing boutique inventory reports. Instead, she was sprawled across our king-sized bed in her silk pajamas, thumbs flying across her iPhone screen, letting out these little snorts of laughter that made my skin crawl. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. What's so funny? I asked from my side of the bed, not looking up from my laptop where I was debugging code for a client's e-commerce platform. The blue light from the screen cast shadows across my face, highlighting the bags under my eyes from too many late nights fixing other people's digital problems. "Oh, just the girls," Monique said, waving her manicured hand dismissively. Her wedding ring caught the light from her phone screen. Sienna posted this hilarious meme about husbands who think they're tech geniuses but can't figure out how to load the dishwasher properly. I glanced over at her. Monique Carter Vance was beautiful in that calculated way that required 2 hours of prep time and a monthly budget that exceeded most people's rent, blonde hair that cost $300 every 6 weeks, yoga-toned body maintained by a personal trainer, and a wardrobe that turned heads at every charity function in our mid-sized main city. "Sounds hilarious," I said dryly, returning to my screen. "I'm sure it's very relatable." She giggled again, and this time I caught a glimpse of her screen. Group chat, multiple participants, photos being shared. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't put my finger on why. "Actually, Elliot," Monique said, her voice taking on that sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "The girls and I were comparing our men tonight. You know, just girl talk." I looked up from my laptop. "Comparing how?" Her smile was predatory. "Well, I showed them some of our more private photos from our chat history, the ones you sent me when you were trying to be romantic." She paused, savoring the moment. They couldn't stop laughing. The words hit me like a physical blow. My throat went dry. "You did what?" "Oh, come on, don't be such a baby about it," she said, still smiling. "It's not like they don't know you. Sienna's seen you in your swim trunks at the pool parties. Brianna was there when you tried to grill those steaks last summer and nearly burned down the deck." I closed my laptop slowly, my hands surprisingly steady. "You shared private photos of me with your friends." "It's not that serious, Elliot. God, you're so sensitive." She turned back to her phone. "Besides, it's not like they were nude photos or anything. Just those sweet little selfies you send when you're trying to be cute. The one where you're flexing in the bathroom mirror was particularly entertaining." My face burned with humiliation and rage, but I kept my voice level. "I see. Don't be mad," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "It's just harmless fun. You should be flattered that my friends find you amusing." I stared at her for a long moment, watching her scroll through what I now realized were probably screenshots of my most vulnerable moments, shared for the entertainment of her cruel little social circle. Monique had always been popular, the kind of woman who collected friends like accessories and discarded them just as easily when they no longer served her purposes. "You know what, Monique?" I said quietly, getting up from the bed. "What?" she asked, still not looking up from her phone. "You won't be laughing soon." That got her attention. She looked up, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me?" But I was already walking toward my home office, my mind racing. Monique thought she was clever, thought she held all the cards in our relationship because she was beautiful and popular and socially connected. What she didn't realize was that I was a software developer with 15 years of experience in digital forensics and data recovery. I knew how to find things people thought they'd hidden. I also knew how to make sure those things saw the light of day. My office was my sanctuary, a converted bedroom filled with multiple monitors, high-end computers, and enough tech equipment to make a Best Buy manager weep with envy. I settled into my ergonomic chair and cracked my knuckles. Time to do what I did best: solve problems. First, I needed to see exactly what Monique had shared. Our phone plan was under my name, which meant I had access to the account details. More importantly, Monique was terrible with technology. She used the same password for everything, never cleared her cache, and had automatic backup enabled on all her devices. Within 20 minutes, I had access to her cloud storage. Within an hour, I'd downloaded every photo, every message, every social media interaction from the past 6 months. What I found made me freeze. The group chat was called Wine and Wine and included Monique, her best friend Sienna Walsh, and Brianna Cooper, a quiet woman who seemed to exist solely to validate whatever Monique and Sienna said. The conversation history was a masterclass in cruelty. "Look at this sweet little message Elliot sent me," Monique had written 3 days ago, followed by a screenshot of a text I'd sent her after a particularly stressful day at work. I'd told her I loved her and was grateful to have her in my life. The responses from her friends were brutal. "Oh, how pathetic," Sienna had replied with crying, laughing emojis. "Does he always sound like a lost puppy?" Brianna had added. But it got worse, much worse. Scrolling back through weeks of messages, I found photo after photo that Monique had shared without my knowledge or consent. Pictures I'd sent her during business trips, thinking I was being romantic. Screenshots of sweet messages I'd written. Even photos she'd taken of me sleeping, accompanied by mocking commentary about my appearance. "My husband is absolutely clueless," she'd written just last week. "He thinks he's this big tech genius, but he can't even figure out that I've been going through his phone for months. Men are so stupid." My hands clenched into fists. Going through my phone? I checked my own device, running a diagnostic I'd developed for clients who suspected corporate espionage. Sure enough, there was spyware installed. Sophisticated enough that most people wouldn't notice it, but not sophisticated enough to hide from someone who knew what to look for. But the real bombshell was buried in a conversation from 2 months ago. Monique hadn't just been sharing photos and mocking me with her friends, she'd been sharing photos and mocking me with other men. Troy Bennett owned a gym downtown, the kind of place where middle-aged men went to pretend they were still 25. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, muscular, confident in that aggressive way that some women found attractive. The message thread between him and Monique was explicit, detailed, and had been going on for 4 months. Kevin Shaw was different. Younger than me, pretty in a way that belonged on magazine covers. He supplied boutique clothing to Monique's store, which apparently wasn't the only service he provided. Their affair had been going on for 6 months, predating Troy by 2 months. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal. She hadn't just humiliated me with her friends, she'd been cheating on me with multiple men while mocking my attempts to be a loving husband. The old Elliot would have confronted her directly, would have shouted and demanded explanations, and probably ended up looking like exactly the pathetic man she'd painted me as to her friends and lovers. The new Elliot had a better idea. I opened my laptop and started typing. If Monique wanted to share private photos and conversations, I was happy to help her expand her audience. I spent the rest of the night meticulously organizing my evidence. Screenshots, photos, message threads, location data from when Monique claimed to be working late, but was actually at Troy's apartment or Kevin's condo. Everything was sorted, cataloged, and saved in multiple locations. By morning, I had a complete picture of my wife's double life. More than that, I had a plan. Monique was already gone when I woke up, which wasn't unusual. She liked to get to her boutique early to set the tone for the day, which apparently meant gossiping with whoever showed up first and planning her social media posts. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to work early. Dinner with the girls tonight. Don't wait up. M." No love you, no have a good day, Just a schedule update like I was her assistant rather than her husband. Perfect. That gave me the entire day to implement phase 1. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. I felt sick to my stomach every time I thought about Monique's betrayal. Then I got to work. First, I needed to understand the full scope of her social circle. Monique was connected to everyone in our city's social scene, from the wives of local business owners to the women who ran charity events and book clubs. She collected social connections like some people collected stamps, always eager to add another name to her contact list. Her phone contained over 300 contacts, but the core group was smaller. The wine and wine chat was the inner circle, but there were secondary groups. Boutique babes, for work-related gossip. Charity chicks, for the women who organized fundraising events, and Fit and Fabulous, for her gym and yoga friends. Each group had its own flavor of cruelty. In Boutique Babes, Monique shared photos of customers she thought were poorly dressed, complete with mocking commentary. Charity Chicks was dedicated to tearing apart women who weren't part of their clique. Fit and Fabulous was where she shared unflattering photos of other women at the gym, usually focused on their bodies. My wife, I realized, was a professional mean girl, and her friends were just as bad. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I started with Sienna Walsh, Monique's best friend and partner in cruelty. Sienna fancied herself a social media influencer, with 15,000 Instagram followers and a lifestyle blog called Sienna Says. She was married to Derek Walsh, who owned a successful accounting firm and had no idea his wife spent her days creating content about their perfect marriage while privately mocking him to her friends. Sienna's phone was even less secure than Monique's. She used the same password for everything, Sienna Walsh 1. Not exactly Fort Knox. Within an hour, I had complete access to her social media accounts, her email, and her cloud storage. What I found was a gold mine of hypocrisy. The woman who posted daily about authenticity and living your truth was living a complete lie. Her Instagram was curated perfection, designer outfits, expensive restaurants, romantic photos with Derek. Her private messages told a different story. She was having an affair with her personal trainer, spending Derek's money on luxury items she claimed were gifted by sponsors who didn't exist, and had been planning to divorce Derek as soon as she could figure out how to maximize her settlement. But the most interesting discovery was in her email. Sienna had been in contact with a local newspaper reporter trying to pitch a story about successful women entrepreneurs that would feature her blog and Monique's boutique. The article was supposed to run next week, complete with a photo shoot and interviews about their inspiring friendship and supportive community of women. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. This was going to be fun. Next, I turned my attention to Brianna Cooper. Brianna was different from Monique and Sienna. Quieter, less confident, but no less cruel when she thought no one was watching. She worked as a dental hygienist and lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. Her role in the group seemed to be validation and encouragement for whatever Monique and Sienna wanted to do. Brianna's digital footprint was smaller but no less revealing. She kept detailed journals on her laptop, password-protected documents where she wrote about her friends, her job, and her secret resentments. Reading them was like getting a backstage pass to her psyche. She was desperately jealous of Monique and Sienna, envious of their money and social status. She hated her job, hated her apartment, hated her life, but most of all, she hated herself for going along with their cruelty when she knew it was wrong. I should have said something when Monique showed us those photos of Elliot she'd written in an entry dated 3 days ago. It wasn't funny. It was mean. But if I don't laugh along, they'll turn on me next. I've seen what they do to people they don't like. Interesting. Brianna had a conscience, buried under layers of fear and insecurity. That made her both the weakest link and potentially the most useful. By noon, I had enough information to destroy all 3 women. But destruction wasn't my goal. Humiliation was. I started with something simple. Monique had shared a particularly embarrassing photo of me from our vacation last year, one where I'd fallen asleep on the beach and gotten sunburned in an unfortunate pattern. Her friends had laughed about it for days, creating memes and jokes at my expense. Time to return the favor. I opened Monique's cloud storage and selected my favorite photos from her affairs. Monique and Troy in his apartment, her face clearly visible. Monique and Kevin in what appeared to be a hotel room based on the generic artwork on the walls. Monique sending explicit photos to both men, often on the same day. Then I opened her contacts list and selected my recipients. Everyone in her phone who mattered. Her mother, her sister, her business partner, the other boutique owners in town, the women from her charity work, her personal trainer, her hairdresser, even her gynecologist. I crafted a simple message. Thought you might be interested in seeing what Monique has been up to lately. She's always been so generous about sharing photos of other people. I attached the photos and hovered my finger over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. Once I sent these photos, there would be no taking them back, no explaining them away, no pretending they were fake or taken out of context. I thought about Monique's face last night, the cruel satisfaction in her eyes as she told me about sharing my private moments with her friends. I thought about months of humiliation, of being mocked and belittled while I tried to be a loving husband. I hit send. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. The first call came 20 minutes later. Monique's phone, which I could monitor thanks to the spyware she'd installed on mine, turnabout being fair play, started ringing nonstop. Her mother, her sister, her business partner. One after another, the calls kept coming. I watched through the boutique's security camera feed, another benefit of being the person who'd set up their digital systems, as Monique's face went from confusion to horror to panic in the span of 5 minutes. She was standing behind the counter when her phone first rang, probably expecting a routine call from a supplier or customer. I watched her answer cheerfully, then go completely still. Her face drained of color as she listened, her free hand gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. The call ended, and immediately her phone rang again. This time, she looked at the caller ID before answering, and I could see her lips moving in what looked like frantic explanations. But before she could finish, the call ended, and the phone rang again. By the fourth call, she wasn't answering anymore. She just stood there, staring at her phone as it buzzed and chimed with incoming calls, texts, and notifications. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was tempered by something else. Sadness, maybe. This woman had been my wife for 6 years. I'd loved her, or at least I'd loved the person I thought she was. Watching her world crumble should have felt like pure victory, but instead it felt hollow. Then I remembered the photo she'd shared of me sleeping, the one where I looked vulnerable and peaceful, and the comments her friends had made. "He looks like a little boy," Sienna had written. "How do you stand it?" Brianna had added. The sadness evaporated, replaced by cold determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Monique. "What did you do?" I typed back. "Shared some photos with your friends. Thought they might enjoy them as much as they enjoyed mine." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "We need to talk." "I'm at work," I replied, which was technically true since I was working on destroying her life. "Maybe tonight, if you're not too busy with the girls." I switched my attention to Sienna's social media accounts. Her Instagram story, usually a constant stream of posed photos and motivational quotes, had gone silent. Her last post, from early this morning, was a picture of her coffee cup with the caption, "Starting the day with gratitude and positive vibes." The irony was delicious, but the real entertainment was in her private messages. Derek Walsh had received the photos I'd sent, and he was not taking the news well. The messages between him and Sienna were escalating rapidly. "Who is this guy?" Derek had texted, along with a screenshot of Troy kissing Monique. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sienna had replied. "Don't lie to me, Sienna. I know this is your friend Monique, which means you knew about this." "Derek, you're being crazy. Those photos could be fake." "Really?" "Because I just called Troy's gym and asked if he knew Monique Vance. He hung up on me." The conversation continued for another 20 messages, with Derek getting angrier and Sienna getting more desperate. Finally, Derek's last message: "I'm coming home. We're going to talk about this face to face." I checked the timestamp. That was 15 minutes ago. Meanwhile, Brianna was having her own crisis. She'd received the photos too, but her reaction was different. Instead of denial or anger, she'd immediately called Monique. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Monique through the boutique camera, pacing back and forth behind the counter while talking on her phone. Her free hand was gesturing wildly, and even without sound, her body language screamed panic. The call ended, and Brianna immediately texted the group chat, "We need to meet, now." Sienna's response was immediate. "Can't. Derek's on his way home." Monique's reply took longer. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing. I think someone sent photos to everyone I know." "What kind of photos?" Brianna asked, though she obviously already knew. "The kind that end marriages," Monique replied. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. But this was just the beginning. Sending photos to their contacts was the opening salvo, designed to create chaos and panic. The real revenge was still coming. I opened my laptop and started working on Phase 2. Sienna's lifestyle blog was hosted on a platform that allowed guest contributors. She'd given Monique and several other friends access to post content, thinking it would help build her community engagement. What she didn't realize was that when you gave someone contributor access, they could also access the site's analytics, advertising accounts, and email lists. I logged in using Monique's credentials and started exploring. Sienna's blog wasn't as successful as she pretended. Her 15,000 Instagram followers were mostly bots, purchased from a service that specialized in fake engagement. Her blog traffic was minimal, and her advertising revenue was less than $50 a month, but she'd been lying to Derek about all of it. According to the emails I found in her account, she'd been telling him the blog was generating significant income, using fake invoices and manufactured brand partnership agreements to justify expensive purchases. I downloaded everything: the fake invoices, the bot purchase receipts, the real analytics showing her pathetic engagement rates, the emails where she bragged to other blogger friends about fooling my husband into funding my lifestyle. Then I packaged it all up and sent it to Derek's work email with a simple subject line: "The truth about Sienna's blog." While that was sending, I turned my attention to Troy Bennett's gym. Troy was the kind of man who built his entire identity around being alpha, dominant, in control. He drove a lifted truck with custom rims, wore tight shirts to show off his muscles, and spoke to women like they were conquests rather than people. Men like Troy had predictable weaknesses: their ego, their reputation, and their money. I'd already done some research on his business. Bennett's gym was struggling financially, behind on rent, and operating with several code violations that the city hadn't caught yet. Troy was also running a side business that he definitely didn't want the authorities to know about. Hidden in the back office of his gym, Troy was selling anabolic steroids to his clients. Not just selling them, but importing them illegally and distributing them without any medical oversight. I'd found the evidence in Monique's phone, photos she'd taken during her visits to his apartment, including several shots of his bathroom counter covered with vials and syringes. Monique probably thought she was being artistic, capturing candid moments of her lover's life. What she'd actually done was document a federal crime. I composed an anonymous email to the DEA's tip line, attaching the photos and providing details about Troy's operation. Then I sent a similar email to the city's code enforcement office, detailing the violations I'd observed during my own research visits to his gym. By the time I was finished, Troy Bennett was going to have bigger problems than angry husbands confronting him about affairs. My phone buzzed with another text from Monique. "Please call me. We can work this out." I ignored it and kept working. By evening, the situation had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. Monique's boutique had closed early, unusual for a woman who prided herself on never missing a business opportunity. Sienna's Instagram had gone completely dark, and her blog was displaying a temporarily unavailable message. Brianna had called in sick to work and was reportedly hiding in her apartment. But the real fireworks were just beginning. I decided it was time to make a public appearance. Monique had texted me 17 times, called 12 times, and even tried to reach me through my work email. She was desperate to control the narrative, to find a way to spin the situation in her favor. I wasn't going to give her that chance. The Rusty Anchor was our city's most popular bar, the kind of place where everyone went to see and be seen. It was also where Monique and her friends held their weekly Wine Wednesday gatherings, gossiping and judging other patrons while pretending to be sophisticated. I arrived at 7 o'clock, dressed in my best suit and carrying myself with a confidence I'd never felt before. The hostess, a young woman named Jessica, who knew me from my previous visits with Monique, looked surprised to see me alone. "Hi, Elliot," she said uncertainly. "Are you meeting Monique here?" "Not tonight," I replied with a smile. "I'm flying solo this evening." I took a seat at the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Monique burst through the front door at 7:15, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and her eyes red from crying. She spotted me immediately and marched over, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. "We need to talk," she said, grabbing my arm. "Now." I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "I'm having a drink. You're welcome to join me, but keep your voice down. This is a public place." She slid onto the stool next to me, her movements sharp and angry. "What the hell did you do, Elliot? My phone hasn't stopped ringing all day. My mother called me crying. My sister won't speak to me. My business partner wants to have an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "Sounds stressful," I said, taking a sip of my whiskey. "Maybe you should talk to your friends about it. I'm sure they'd be very supportive." "This isn't funny," she hissed, trying to keep her voice low but failing. "You've ruined everything." I turned to face her fully, my expression serious. "I've ruined everything? That's interesting, Monique, because from my perspective, you're the one who's been sharing private photos of me with your friends for months. You're the one who's been cheating on me with multiple men. You're the one who installed spyware on my phone to monitor my communications." Her face went white. "How did you know about the spyware? I'm a software developer, Monique. It's literally my job to find things like that." I took another sip of my drink. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out eventually?" She opened and closed her mouth several times, looking like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she found her voice. "Those photos you sent. How did you get them?" "The same way you got access to my private messages," I replied. "Turnabout is fair play." "You can't do this to me," she said, her voice rising. "I'll sue you. I'll tell everyone you're stalking me, that you're dangerous." "With what evidence?" I interrupted. "Everything I sent came from your own phone, your own accounts. You took those photos, Monique. You sent those messages. You shared those intimate moments with men who aren't your husband. I just made sure the right people saw them." Several other patrons had started to notice our conversation, turning to watch the drama unfold. Monique realized we had an audience and tried to lower her voice again. "Please," she said, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely desperate. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the photos, about the jokes. It was stupid and mean and I shouldn't have done it. But what you've done today, it's going to destroy my life." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. All I saw was fear and calculation, a woman trying to figure out how to manipulate her way out of consequences. "Your life?" I said quietly. What about my life, Monique? What about 6 years of marriage where you were mocking me behind my back? What about the humiliation of knowing that every time I tried to be romantic or vulnerable with you, you were sharing it with your friends for entertainment? It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. It was exactly like that. I finished my whiskey and stood up. And now, you get to experience what it feels like to be the punchline. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my arm again. Elliot, wait. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Monique, our marriage ended the moment you decided I was someone to be laughed at instead of loved. What's happening now isn't the beginning of our problems. It's the end of them. I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear her starting to cry, but I didn't turn around. I'd spent too many years caring about Monique's tears, trying to fix her problems and make her happy. Now it was time to focus on making myself happy. As I reached the door, I heard a commotion behind me. Turning back, I saw Troy Bennett entering the bar, his face red with anger and his hands clenched into fists. He spotted Monique immediately and stormed over to where she was still sitting at the bar. You stupid snake, he snarled, loud enough for half the bar to hear. Do you have any idea what you've done? Monique looked up at him with confusion and fear. Troy? What are you doing here? The feds raided my gym this afternoon, he said, grabbing her by the shoulders. They had photos, Monique. Photos from my apartment. Photos that could only have come from your phone. The entire bar had gone quiet now, everyone watching the drama unfold. I stayed by the door, curious to see how this would play out. I don't understand, Monique said, though her face suggested she was starting to. Someone sent those photos to the DEA, Troy continued, his voice getting louder. Someone who had access to your phone, to your accounts. Someone who wanted to destroy both of us. Monique's eyes found mine across the crowded bar. The look on her face was pure hatred, but there was something else there too. Respect, maybe, or fear. Elliot, she whispered. Troy followed her gaze and spotted me by the door. His expression shifted from anger to rage, and he started walking toward me with the aggressive swagger of a man who'd spent his life solving problems with his fists. You snake, he said, closing the distance between us. You think you're real clever, don't you? I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of intimidation. I think I'm thorough, I replied calmly. It's a professional habit. He stopped just inches from my face, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath and see the veins bulging in his neck. You've destroyed my business, my life. No, I said, my voice steady and clear. You destroyed your business when you decided to sell illegal steroids. You destroyed your life when you decided to sleep with another man's wife. I just made sure the consequences caught up with you. For a moment, I thought he was going to hit me. His right hand twitched, and I could see him calculating whether he could get away with assault in a crowded bar. But then something in my expression must have warned him off, because he stepped back. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, I replied, it is. I walked out of the bar into the cool Maine evening, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and the people who'd thought they could humiliate me without consequences. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The next morning brought news that exceeded even my expectations. Derek Walsh had filed for divorce and frozen all of Sienna's accounts. Troy Bennett's gym was closed indefinitely while federal investigators combed through his records. Brianna Cooper had called in sick again and was reportedly having some kind of nervous breakdown. But Monique was proving more resilient than I'd anticipated. I watched through the boutique's security cameras as she arrived for work, her appearance immaculate despite everything that had happened. She moved with purpose, making phone calls, typing emails, and generally projecting an air of business as usual. She was trying to salvage her reputation, spinning the situation as a victim of a vindictive ex-husband's harassment. I had to admire her strategy, even as I prepared to demolish it. My phone rang at 10 o'clock. Unknown number. Hello, Elliot. This is Patricia Henley from the Maine Tribune. I was hoping we could talk. Patricia Henley was the reporter who'd been working with Sienna on the successful women entrepreneurs story. Apparently, she'd decided the real story was even more interesting than the puff piece she'd originally planned. I'd be happy to talk, I said, though I should mention that I'm not really the story here. Oh, I think you might be surprised about that, she replied. From what I've been able to piece together, you've orchestrated one of the most comprehensive revenge campaigns I've ever seen. And you did it all without breaking any laws. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, far from Monique's boutique and the social circles she frequented. Patricia turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with the kind of direct manner that suggested she'd been dealing with bullshit for years and had no patience left for it. So, she said, settling into her chair with a notepad and digital recorder. Tell me about your marriage. I told her everything. The years of subtle put-downs, the gradual erosion of my self-esteem, the discovery of Monique's affairs, and her cruel treatment of our private moments. I showed her screenshots of the group chats, evidence of the affairs, proof of Monique's systematic campaign to humiliate me. And your response was to expose all of this publicly, Patricia said. It wasn't a question. My response was to give her the same treatment she'd been giving me, I corrected. She wanted to share private photos and mock vulnerable moments. I thought she might enjoy being on the other side of that experience. What about Troy Bennett? The steroid charges are serious. He could go to prison. I shrugged. Troy Bennett was committing federal crimes long before I came into the picture. If he didn't want to face consequences for selling illegal drugs, he shouldn't have been selling illegal drugs. Patricia nodded, making notes. And Sienna Walsh? Her husband has filed for divorce and is seeking to recover money she spent under fraudulent pretenses. Sienna Walsh built her entire lifestyle on lies and manipulation. Derek deserved to know the truth about what his money was funding. We talked for over an hour, with Patricia asking detailed questions about my methods, my motivations, and my plans going forward. She was particularly interested in the technical aspects of how I'd accessed Monique's accounts and communications. Everything I did was legal, I explained. Morally questionable, perhaps, but legal. Monique gave me access to her accounts years ago when I set up her business systems. She never revoked that access. The spyware on my phone gave me legal justification to monitor her communications in return, and everything I shared came from her own devices and accounts. So, you're saying this was all justified? I considered the question carefully. I'm saying that actions have consequences. Monique and her friends spent months treating me like a joke, sharing my private moments for their entertainment, mocking my attempts to be a loving husband. They thought there would be no consequences for their cruelty, because I was just the boring tech guy who wouldn't fight back. But you did fight back. I leveled the playing field, I corrected. They wanted to play games with people's privacy and dignity. I just showed them what it felt like to lose. After Patricia left, I returned home to find Monique waiting for me. She was sitting in her car in our driveway, and she got out as soon as she saw me approaching. We need to talk, she said, but her tone was different now. Less demanding, more desperate. I thought we covered everything last night, I replied, unlocking the front door. She followed me inside, her heels echoing in the foyer. Elliot, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But this has gone too far. My business is falling apart. My friends won't speak to me. My family is humiliated. I turned to face her in our living room, the same room where we'd shared 6 years of marriage, where I'd thought we were building a life together. And how exactly is that my problem? I asked. Because we're married, she said, her voice cracking. Because despite everything that's happened, we made vows to each other. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. Yes, I remember the vows, Monique. I also remember taking them seriously, while you were treating our marriage like a joke. She started crying then, real tears this time, not the calculated manipulation I'd seen so many times before. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry for everything, for the photos, for the affairs, for treating you the way I did. I was stupid and cruel, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm begging you to stop this." For a moment, looking at her broken and desperate, I almost felt something like sympathy. This woman had been my wife, my partner, the person I'd planned to spend my life with. Seeing her destroyed should have felt like victory, but instead, it just felt empty. Then I remembered the laughter in her voice when she'd told me about sharing my photos, the casual cruelty of her response when I'd expressed hurt, the months of systematic humiliation while she pretended to love me. "Monique," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me 3 nights ago when I asked you to stop sharing private photos of me with your friends?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't. You said I was being too sensitive. You said it was just harmless fun. You said I should be flattered that your friends found me amusing." I paused, letting the words sink in. "So I'm curious. Are you feeling flattered right now? Is this harmless fun for you?" Her face crumpled. "Please don't do this." "Do what? Give you the same treatment you gave me? Share your private moments with people who will judge and mock you? Make you feel small and humiliated and powerless?" I shook my head. "You had your chance to stop this, Monique. You had your chance to treat our marriage with respect. You chose differently." "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing," I replied. "I don't want anything from you anymore. I want you to leave this house, file for divorce, and start learning to live with the consequences of your choices." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her cycling through different approaches: anger, manipulation, bargaining, desperation. Finally, she seemed to realize that none of them were going to work. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "I have." She gathered her purse and walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. "You know, for all your talk about consequences and justice, you've become just as cruel as you think I am." I considered her words carefully. "Maybe," I said. "But here's the difference, Monique. I learned it from you." She left without another word, and I watched through the window as she drove away. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more act to this play. 2 weeks later, everything came together in a way that even I hadn't anticipated. The Maine Tribune published Patricia Henley's article on a Thursday morning. The headline read, "The Revenge of the Nice Guy: How One Man's Digital Skills Exposed His Wife's Double Life." It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, complete with screenshots, interviews, and a detailed timeline of events. The article painted me as a sympathetic figure, the devoted husband who'd been systematically humiliated and betrayed, who'd used his professional skills to expose the truth about his wife's cruelty. Monique and her friends came across as exactly what they were: privileged women who'd thought they could treat others badly without consequences. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The article went viral on social media, with thousands of shares and comments. Most of the reaction was supportive of my actions, with many people sharing their own stories of being bullied or humiliated by people they'd trusted. But the real impact was local. In our small Maine city, the story became the talk of every coffee shop, bar, and social gathering. Monique's boutique, already struggling from the loss of customers, was forced to close permanently. Sienna's blog and social media presence disappeared entirely. Brianna quietly left town, reportedly moving back in with her parents in another state. Troy Bennett was indicted on federal drug charges and faced up to 10 years in prison. His gym was sold to pay his legal fees, and he became a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing steroids with stupidity. But the most satisfying moment came 3 weeks after the article was published, at the annual charity auction that Monique had helped organize for the past 5 years. I hadn't planned to attend. The event was a reminder of the social world that Monique and I had shared, full of people who'd known about her affairs and cruelty, but had chosen to look the other way. But Gavin, my old college friend who'd helped me with some of the technical aspects of my revenge, convinced me to make an appearance. "You should see this," he said. "You've become something of a local legend." He wasn't wrong. When I walked into the hotel ballroom where the auction was being held, conversations stopped and heads turned. But instead of the hostile stares I'd expected, I saw something different. Respect, admiration, and not a small amount of awe. "Elliot!" called out Margaret Chen, the wife of a local business owner who'd always been friendly but distant. "I read that article about you. Good for you for standing up for yourself." Similar comments followed me throughout the evening. People who'd never given me a second thought when I was Monique's quiet husband were now eager to talk to me, to hear my side of the story, to congratulate me on my courage. It was surreal and gratifying in equal measure. The real moment of truth came when the auction's organizers took the stage to thank the volunteers and sponsors. Monique's name had traditionally been among the first mentioned, recognizing her years of service and dedication to the cause. This year, there was no mention of her at all. It was as if she'd been erased from the organization's history, her contributions forgotten in the wake of her scandal. I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to see Brianna Cooper standing behind me. She looked different, thinner, more tired, but somehow more genuine than I'd ever seen her. "Hi, Elliot," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here." "Brianna," I replied, surprised. "I thought you'd left town." "I did. I'm just back for a few days to settle some things." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize to you. For everything. For going along with Monique and Sienna, for laughing at those photos, for being part of something so cruel." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. All I saw was genuine remorse and shame. "Thank you," I said. "That means something. I know it doesn't excuse what we did, but I want you to know that I never felt good about it. I was scared of being on the outside, of being the target instead of part of the group. But that doesn't make it right." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't, but acknowledging it is a start." She nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I think Monique finally understands what she lost. Not the marriage, not the social status, but the man who would have done anything for her if she'd just treated him with basic decency. "Maybe," I said, "but it's too late for that now." "I know," Brianna replied. "That's the real tragedy of all this." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Around me, the auction continued. People bid on donated items, and life went on. But everything had changed, and everyone knew it. I stayed until the end of the event, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who'd never bothered to learn my name when I was married to Monique. It was a strange kind of vindication, being celebrated for destroying the woman who'd once been the center of this social world. As I was leaving, I spotted a familiar figure in the hotel bar. Monique was sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a glass of wine and staring at her phone. She looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of her fallen reputation. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she raised her glass in a small, sardonic salute, and I found myself nodding in acknowledgement. There was nothing left to say between us. No anger, no hatred, no lingering love. Just the recognition of two people whose lives had been irrevocably changed by choices and consequences. I walked out of the hotel into the cool Maine night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, the charity auction continued, the social world that had once seemed so important, carrying on without the woman who thought she was indispensable. Monique had wanted to laugh at me, to make me the punchline of her cruel jokes. She'd thought I was weak, pathetic, someone who would accept humiliation without fighting back. She'd been wrong about all of it. I got in my car and drove home to the house that was finally, truly mine. Tomorrow, I would start building a new life, one based on respect rather than ridicule, on genuine connections rather than social climbing. But tonight, I was content to savor the satisfaction of a job well done. Monique had taught me that actions have consequences, that cruelty eventually comes back to haunt those who practice it. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, and in the end, the joke was on her.